Hello, listeners. It's Gunter Swoboda here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organization cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number one in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter, the podcast that I've dedicated to redefining masculinity and inspiring meaningful personal and social change. Growth, if you want to put that word in. I'm your host, Gunter Swoboda. I'm an author, a psychologist, psychotherapist, speaker, and I'm interested in all things humanistic. That includes anthropology, sociology, psychology, philosophy, but also the sciences, because without that, we're not doing very well either. Unfortunately, our emphasis over time has been to shift from the humanities, which is a deep regret that I have, to what people often refer to as pure science. Now, some people actually think about science to include things like economics. And that is essentially one of the things I want to challenge in today's podcast. Because if it's going to be science, it needs to have a certain level of predictability, and it appears that it doesn't. But the other issue is that some time ago, it was a couple of years ago, a commentator in the Sydney Morning Herald in Australia, Ross Gittins, presented the idea that economics is fundamentally grounded in Christian values, and I thought that was particularly peculiar. I'm not sure how he got to that, but he did. Now, while Christianity has undeniably shaped aspects of Western culture, suggesting that our entire economic system hinges exclusively on Christian values ignores a vast expanse of human economic activity, in fact spanning thousands of years. The fundamental economic concepts of supply, demand, exchange and cooperation emerged long before Christianity, dating back to ancient civilizations such as Mesopotamia, China, Egypt, and Greece. The ancient Greek philosophers Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid critical groundwork for economic thought that continues to inform modern economics. Their philosophies focused on justice, equity, and the ethical dimensions of economic interactions, long predating the development of Christian doctrine. In other words, fundamentally, economics is a subset of ethics, and we have completely lost track of this, much to our detriment, individually and culturally. So why am I discussing economics on a podcast about masculinity? Well, because economics is inherently interwoven with social values and significantly impacts on our conceptions of masculinity. The whole idea of the protector-provider is essentially almost completely economic. Definitely the provider, and to some degree the protector. I'll leave that one to your own imagination for the time being. Now, the economic theory that blossomed past the 1970s, which is neoliberal economic structures, have heavily embodied patriarchal values. They're about territory, hierarchy, acquisition, competition, and combativeness. Look at Trump's moves on Canada, on Greenland, right? Look at Putin's incursion into the Ukraine. These are ideas that are essentially of a feudal nature. They also contain in them a sort of social Darwinism, okay, which is not really acceptable. Social Darwinism lacks a certain rigor and philosophical depth. So when we look at these values, they fundamentally emphasize power, dominance, and relentless competition. And in that embedded is relentless exploitation. How does that articulate? Well, for a start, it articulates because we see our natural resources and other people from the standpoint of exploitation, and also from a perspective of ownership rather than stewardship. So that applies both to the material but the non-material aspects. I was always a bit sus when in the 80s we started talking about human resources rather than employee relations. Now, in the Good Men Great framework, I critically examine and challenge these patriarchal norms. We promote values that nurture emotional intelligence, empathy, cooperation, and community, and above all, the ethics of interpersonal relationship and reflexivity. Now, my belief is it's essential to question and understand how economic systems influence and reflect the kind of masculinity we have been cultivating and what we need to do to progress in a healthier way. Because what we're doing currently ain't healthy. And there are some suggestions in lots of different areas of the media and science and philosophy that human beings are rushing to extinction. Part of that became a thing through the Industrial Revolution. But it also is now at a greater level due to the information technology that's emerged. The tech bros have gone overboard, and they have fundamentally got a monopoly on wealth that's never been seen before in the whole history of humanity. Elon Musk, particularly through his expansive reach into different industries and certainly government subsidies, has cornered the wealth to a large degree of the planet. Now, there could be some debate about that, but let me stay with it. So, today's prevalent neoliberal economic practices bear a stronger resemblance to Ayn Rand's philosophies than any Christian teaching. Rand advocated for individualism, rational self-interest, and minimised altruism. Well, let me make a couple of amendments there. Her idea about self-interest is not rational. Most self-interest is not rational. If you understand human psyche, a large number of human beings essentially are greedy. And it appears that the more wealth they have, the greedier they become. This starkly contrasts with the communal and altruistic values at the core of Christian teachings, emphasising community welfare, compassion, and mutual support. Again, let me direct your attention to the United States, where the MAGA movement appears to have no ethics, no clear values about community and about relationships, about altruism. Anyone who even looks like making a stand in that department is called woke, a derogatory term used by the right wing for anybody who has any social conscience. So, what are the alternatives? These alternative models can move away from aggressive competition and profit maximisation, focusing instead on equitable resource distribution, community empowerment, and long-term sustainability. This shifts significantly and reduces the psychological and emotional strain associated with neoliberal economics, fundamentally promoting a healthier social and individual state of well-being. So, are there any practical applications? Of course there are. So I want to draw your attention to a couple of simple, actionable ways you can align yourself to those economic practices that have values like proposed in Making Good Men Great. So one way of doing it, as always, is to dive inside and do essentially a values clarification exercise. Reflect and write down your personal values regarding money, success, community, and relationships. Evaluate how your financial decisions reflect these values. Now, interestingly, in coaching and working with men, often businessmen, we continue to impose a binary perspective on success. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's two parts to it. One is failure and the other one is success. Success, by and large, is measured by the acquisition of status, territory, the wealth that you can combine into your, asset base, like houses, real estate in general, all sorts of stuff, money, essentially. That's highly valued in our society. That, when I talk to most teenagers, when I say to them, what is it that you'd really like to do in life? A lot of them go, well, I want to have a lot of money, and when I sort of say why, well, they sort of go, well, that I can buy the things that I need and provide for my family. Some of that's all good, right? But the problem with this is our system's stacked against them. And if you have any questions about that, look at what happens to people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Very few of them reach the sort of definitional success landscape that we talk about without thinking about it. The other part to it is that failure, this intense, deep-seated fear of failure for a lot of people is very much about getting stuff wrong. So they become risk-averse or if they're highly optimistic and have a certain personality type, they become extreme risk takers. So it can get really out of hand. The second point that I want to really draw your attention to is the whole idea of a community engagement. Become involved in cooperative businesses, local economic initiatives, and or eco-friendly practices that reflect community values, sustainability and cooperation. In the Australian outback, there are many, many, many small towns that would have become ghost towns had the community not pulled together and created exactly what we're talking about here. Cooperative business initiatives, local, keeping things local. So, the whole infrastructure is about supporting the community from within. Yes, and drawing people from the outside in as well. Many of those communities are highly eco-friendly. They focus on sustainability long term. They're not just into exploitation. A lot of those communities had to go there because mining shut down. Mining is temporary. The other part of it is engage in open dialogue, and unfortunately this is where we're really in trouble, because the whole notion of open dialogue, and I'm not going to use the term freedom of speech because that's gotten hijacked. I'm talking about rational, empathic, open dialogue where we sit down to have conversations with peers, with family, with community members about shifting how we see economic practices and shifting them towards being more cooperative, more sustainable, and less exploitive. Take a look and discuss the potential of personal and collective benefits of these shifts. As I said, take a look at a lot of country towns in Australia. They are success stories in my book, not because they're uber wealthy and dripping with Lamborghinis and gold and, whatever it is, 10-story buildings. They live a simpler, more sustainable life. The reality is that the planet cannot sustain 8 billion people. We need to think differently. So yes, folks, as always, there is a call to action and a closing reflection. A guy called Tony Benn famously stated that true leaders should be signposts, guiding society towards sustainable and inclusive principles, not weathercocks that shift with the wind of convenience. As men dedicated to both personal growth and social transformation, our responsibility is clear. Advocate and embody economic values grounded in those principles of empathy, reflexivity, fairness, community and cooperation. And that in of itself will support the feminist project. Feminism is not the enemy. Feminism is simply about equity. And we should never forget that. This week, take deliberate steps to align your economic practices more closely with your authentic self and the Making Good Men Great principles. Reflect on how your daily financial decisions impact not only on your well-being, but the broader community environment. How can you support a local business? Do we go to the big mega superstores and buy stuff there, or do we stick with locally owned businesses? Whether that be produce or whether that be retail in fashion, whatever it is. So, on a closing note, again, let me thank you for all those people who tune in to this podcast and want to think about themselves, community, and the planet differently. I want to thank you for joining me today and in the weeks to come on Inspire Change. Let me remind you that change begins with each of us. So until next time, continue to inspire meaningful change by living thoughtfully, compassionately, and authentically. Until next time, this is me signing off.
Greetings to all our listeners. This week's gratitude goes out to those of you listening in Iceland. We welcome you to the top 10 global listeners list. Congratulations at landing at number 10. You made it. We thank you for tuning in and promoting positive social change. This makes you a part of Gunter's efforts in transforming not only men's lives, but lives in general, and we're grateful you have joined us. I, Devonna Prinzi, the co-executive producer, and our showrunner, Miranda Spiegner-Sapone, sincerely thank you and ask that you please take the time to like, follow, subscribe, and share as your efforts make a difference to everyone here at Inspire Change with Gunter. Please remember, if you want to share your story of social change, feel free to reach out to the show directly. Please see the show notes for our contact information. As always, thank you to each and every one of our listeners, but most importantly, please keep inspiring positive social change.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.